So I know you're 20, 21?
21.
21. So asking you for advice is a little bit funny, but at the same time not, because you've created a social network. You've created a startup from nothing, as we talked about earlier, like without knowing how to program, you've programmed. I mean, you've taken this whole journey that a lot of people I think would be really inspired by. So given that, and given the fact that 20 years from now, you probably laugh at the advice you're going to give now.
Absolutely. I hope so. If I don't laugh at the advice I give now, something went desperately wrong, right?
Yeah. So do you have advice for people that want to follow in your footsteps and create a startup, whether it's in the software app domain or whether it's anything else?
So I'll speak specifically about social media apps.
Yes.
Try to keep it as narrow as possible so I can laugh as little as possible when I'm 41. And what I would say is that if you're like a 21, 22-year-old who's looking at me and being like, I want to do something like this, what I would say is you probably know better than just about anyone. And if you have a feeling in yourself that this is something that I have to do, and this is something I could imagine myself doing for the next 10 years, because if you're successful, you are going to have to do it for the next 10 years. And through the ups and the downs, through the amazing interviews with Lex and through the not so amazing articles you might have with other people, right? And you're going to have to ride those highs and lows, and you have to believe in what you're doing. But if you have that feeling, what I would say is listen to as few people as possible, because people are experts in domains. But when it comes to like what's hot and what makes sense in a social context, you are the authority as a young person who's going through these things and living in your sort of milieu. And I mean, I've talked to, at this point, so many experts,
Yeah.
so many investors, VCs.
So you'd
be amazed at the advice I've gotten.
So there's like a minefield of bad advice.
That's the hardest part, I think, for young people. And it's the thing when people like, I help Yellies all the time who ask, like, I never turn down when a founder asks me to have a conversation. I never turn it down. I'm always there for them. And the number one thing I worry about is that at Yale, we're taught implicitly and explicitly that you listen to the adult in the room, you listen to the person with the highest, pay grade.
Yeah.
And it's devastating because that's how innovation dies. And,
yeah, it's intimidating to, like, you talk to a VC who probably made
it's worth $1 billion.
Yeah, $1 billion. And they're going to tell you, all the successful startups they helped fund, or even just a successful business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Is going to tell you some advice, and it's hard psychologically to think that they might be wrong. Yeah, but you're saying that's the only way you succeed.
The only way you can succeed, because if they knew what they were doing, they would have built it themselves. And what's especially hard is people go, oh, of course, I'll listen to their advice, but I'll know why it's wrong.
Yeah,
and then I'll do my own thing, and that sounds great in the abstract. But sometimes you can't always even put your finger on why they're wrong.
Yeah.
And I think to have the conviction to say, you're wrong and I can't tell you why, but I still think I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a rare thing, especially at it's very counterintuitive. And you might even say it's hubris or arrogant, but I think it's necessary because a lot of these things they're not things that you can really put into words until you see them in action. Like a lot of them are kind of happy accidents.
Yeah, it's been tough for me. Like as a person who, like, I'm very empathetic. So when people tell me stuff, I kind of want to understand them, and it's been a painful process, especially people close to me. Basically, everything I've done, especially in the recent few years, a lot of people close to me said not to do.
Yeah.
And like my parents too, that's been a hard one, is to basically acknowledge to myself that you don't know, like you don't, that everything you're going to say by way of advice for me is not going to be helpful. Like I love my parents very much, but like they're just like they don't get it. Uh, as you put it beautifully, it's very difficult to put your finger on exactly why, because a lot of advice sounds reasonable.
That's the worst kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it sounds really good, that just means it's an earworm. Like that's like a song that you hear on the radio, and then you're like, you're humming it in the car, and it's like it's the same thing. The better it sounds, the more skeptical.
Yeah, reason is a bad drug. Like, you should be very careful, because like the things that seem impossible, every major innovation, every major business seems impossible at birth. But even not just the impossible things. I think you look at like love, for example.
Mm.
It's very easy to give advice to sort of point out all the ways it can go wrong, or marriage, all the divorces that people go through, all the pain of years that you go through the divorce, like the system of marriage, the marriage industrial complex, all the money that's wasted, all those kinds of things. But that advice is useless when you're in love. Like, the point is to just pat the person on the back and say, "Go get him, kid." Like, what is it? Goodwill Hunting. I went to see about a girl.
Oh yeah,
That's a good movie.
I love that movie.
But yeah, that took me a long time to figure out. I'm still trying to fight through it, but especially when you're young, that's hard. But nothing
Really,
in life is worth accomplishing is easy. So
but I think it's really interesting you make that connection between like startup advice and like your parents, because it's the exact same sort of mechanism where when you're young, your parents are usually like right,
yeah,
right? And the experts are usually right. And if you listen to them and you follow their orders, you're gonna go to a school like Yale.
yeah,
And at a certain point, it stops making sense. And I've seen my friends at Yale go down paths because they just continued listening to their parents that I know in their heart of hearts is not the right path for them.
yeah. You know what? That's how I see like the education system. The whole point is to guide you to a certain point in your life, and everybody's point is different. And your task is to, at that point, to have a personal revolution and create your own path.
But no one tells you that.
Nobody tells you that, because they want you to keep following the same path as they're leading you towards. Like, they're not going to say your whole job is to eventually rebel.
Yeah.
That's how rebellion works. You're not supposed to be told, but that is the task. They can take you, just like you said, and depending who you are, they can take you really far. But at a certain point, you have to rebel. That could be getting your PhD.
Something?
That could be in your undergrad. That could be high school. So.
Yeah, it could be at any point. One thing that I think played a pretty pivotal role, and I've never really mentioned this, he might not even know, the person I'm about to tell you about, in sort of me actually going out and making Librex, was that I was taking this graduate level math class, I think my sophomore year. And I met this PhD student who was also in it and had considerable citations and also startup experience. And I think he actually ended up being the CTO of a unicorn later on. I've sort of lost touch with him, but we're still Facebook friends, as it is in the 21st century, right? Yeah. So, and I was in a class and I was telling him, I really want to make this thing, but I have no technical background. And this guy's a computer genius. He worked under Dan Spielman at Yale. So
yeah,
he's a good guy, right? And we were doing some math together. We were doing something on discrepancy, for those of you who really care about math. So combinatorics. And he just turns to me and he's like, "I think you could do it." I'm like, "What do you mean you think I could do it?" He's like, "I think you could do it."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Really?" But I respected this guy so much. His name was Young Duck. Shout out to Young Duck. I respected this guy so much that I was like, if Young Duck says I can do it, and Young Duck is a legit genius, and he knows me, because we were in 2 classes together and we spent a lot of time together. If he thinks I can do it, then who am I to say I can't do it?
Yeah, that's a lesson for mentorship. Is like,
by the way, he has no idea, probably.
Well, he might not even remember that interaction, which is
Yeah.
funny. But the point is that when a crazy young kid comes up to you with a crazy dream, you know, every once in a while, you should just pat him on the back and say, "I believe in you." Like you can do it. If they look up to you, that means your words have power. And if you say, "No, no, come on, be like reasonable," like you know, uh, finish your schoolwork kind of thing, like that's unreasonable to take that leap now. Just finish your education, blah blah
Hmm.
blah. Whatever the reasonable advice is. Every once in a while, maybe often, as a mentor, you should say, go see about a girl in California or whatever the equivalent is.
That was my moment. That was my Goodwill Hunting moment, I
It's your
guess.
Goodwill Hunting moment. Oh man, I miss Robin Williams. That was a special guy.